A fine rain fell over the winding road as Sophia's car stopped before the iron gates of the Costa mansion. The cold mountain wind whispered through the trees, tugging at the hood of her coat as she adjusted the camera hanging around her neck. Everything about that place felt too quiet, as if time itself had paused to watch her arrive. A staff member greeted her and led her through a wide corridor filled with old paintings and modern sculptures. The mix of art and shadow made the air dense, almost hypnotic. Sophia's heart quickened. She loved the mystery behind images. But here, the mystery seemed to be looking back at her. When the main hall door opened, she saw him. Adrian Costa stood by the large window dressed in black. His face was firm, his eyes sharp and unreadable. He didn't smile. He simply studied her, like a man unsure if he liked the painting in front of him. "Miss Andrade?" His voice was low, calm, carrying a natural authority. "Yes," she answered, trying to hide the effect that gaze had on her. "I'm here to photograph the gallery, as agreed." "Good." He stepped closer. "I want you to capture what isn't visible, not just the beauty, but what hides behind it." The way he looked at her made Sophia's breath falter for a moment. There was no obvious malice in his eyes, only something far more dangerous: curiosity. She raised her camera, and through the lens she found his gaze locked on hers, steady, intense, impenetrable. And in that instant she knew this photograph would be unlike any other she had ever taken. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like and follow the channel to catch the next videos. The next morning dawned wrapped in mist. Sunlight struggled to pierce the white veil that covered the mansion's garden, and Sophia, her camera hanging from her shoulder, walked quietly through the wide corridors. Every sound echoed, as if the house itself were breathing. Adrian was already waiting for her in the main hall, standing beside a table set with cups of coffee and a few documents. The same watchful gaze, now slightly more curious, met hers as she entered. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, pouring the coffee. "Enough," she replied with a faint smile. "This house is different. It tends to have that effect," he said, stepping closer and handing her a cup. Their fingers brushed briefly, a simple touch, yet strong enough to send her pulse racing. Sophia looked away, focusing on her camera. "I think I'll start with the smaller portraits. The light here is incredible." "Do as you wish," Adrian replied, watching her move around the room. "Just promise me one thing. Don't try to capture only what you see." She paused. "What do you mean?" "Sometimes," he said in a low, almost whispered tone, "what's outside the frame is what truly matters." Sophia lifted the camera and, without thinking, framed him in the lens. He didn't look away, as on the contrary, he held her gaze, steady and unblinking, as if he could see right through her. The click of the shutter echoed loudly in the silence. For a moment, Sophia had the strange feeling that it wasn't she who was observing him, but he who was capturing her with his eyes. The day moved slowly, and the afternoon light spilled through the mansion's windows like liquid gold. Sophia had spent hours capturing details, the brushstrokes of paintings, the interplay of shadows, the quiet life within the walls. Everything seemed to breathe a silent story, one she hadn't yet uncovered. When she finished reviewing the images, Adrian appeared at the door of her makeshift studio. "May I see what you've captured?" he asked, his voice calm but tinged with something more, a personal interest. Sophia turned the laptop toward him, showing the photos. He leaned closer, bracing a hand on the table. His face was near hers. His scent, woody and refined, surrounded her. "You have a singular eye," he said, studying each photo intently. "You capture more than you show." "I try to see what others overlook," she replied with a shy smile. "It's my job." "No," he said, meeting her gaze. "It's your gift." The silence that followed was heavy, electric. Adrian picked up one of the cameras resting on the table and raised it toward her. "Now it's my turn," he said in a low, steady tone. "I want to take your portrait." Sophia hesitated. "I'm not used to being on the other side of the lens." "Then it's time to change that." She positioned herself by the window, the soft light bathing her skin. The sound of the shutter broke the air like a breath. Adrian photographed her carefully, but there was something different in his movements, a quiet reverence, an intimate curiosity. "Look at me," he murmured. When she did, their eyes locked. There was no camera between them anymore, only a charged silence, alive and undeniable. Sophia felt her heartbeat quicken. In that moment, she understood what he meant by capturing what cannot be seen, and she also understood that Adrian's gaze was beginning to reveal far more than he intended. The sound of the last shutter click still lingered in the air as Sophia lowered the camera, trying to steady her breath. Adrian watched her in silence, his gaze heavy with something she couldn't quite name: admiration, desire, or memory. She stepped away from the window and began to organize her equipment, but something on the opposite wall caught her eye. Among the framed portraits hung an old painting, a woman with a calm expression and deep, soulful eyes. Sophia walked closer, a chill tracing down her spine. The woman in the portrait looked far too much like her. "Who is she?" Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Adrian approached slowly. His tone was steady, yet carried a faint tremor. "Elena." Sophia frowned. "Your wife?" "She was." His answer was short, cutting. "She died a few years ago." The silence that followed was heavy, uneasy. Sophia tried to hide her discomfort, but the resemblance between her and the woman was impossible to ignore. "I see," she murmured, turning back to the table. "It must be difficult, living surrounded by so many memories." "Some never leave," he said, his gaze still locked on her, "especially when they seem to return in disguise." His words betrayed him. Sophia's heart skipped a beat, part fear, part something she didn't want to name. At that moment she realized Adrian's gaze wasn't just fascination. It was the look of a man haunted by a ghost. Sophia spent the rest of the afternoon avoiding Adrian's gaze. The portrait of the woman on the wall seemed to follow her silently, as if guarding a truth she wasn't ready to face. When her car arrived, Adrian offered to walk her to the gate, but she declined with a restrained smile. Over the next few days, she tried to focus solely on her work. Still, the name Elena echoed in her mind like a note that refused to fade. That's when she decided to call an old colleague, Lucas, to help her with the lighting setup for the exhibition. He was easygoing, warm, and unlike Adrian, he smiled with his eyes. That afternoon, while adjusting the lights in the main hall, Sophia caught a reflection in the glass. Adrian was standing at the doorway, watching. The air seemed to change. "I didn't know you'd have company today," he said, stepping in slowly. "I asked Lucas to help. The lighting here is tricky," she replied, trying to sound casual. Adrian extended his hand in a polite but cold greeting. "Adrian Costa." "Lucas Martins," the other man said, smiling. "I've heard a lot about you, sir." The silence that followed was thick, as if the room itself had stopped breathing. Sophia felt Adrian's eyes on her, not angry, but possessive. When Lucas left to fetch the tripod, Adrian stepped closer. "Has he always been this attentive with you?" His voice was low, edged with something sharp. Sophia raised her chin. "He's a friend, and my work doesn't concern your feelings, Mr. Costa." He leaned in, voice deep. "Doesn't it?" he murmured. "Because it seems to concern me very much." His gaze burned, a mixture of desire and something far more dangerous: jealousy. For a heartbeat, Sophia thought of stepping back, but she couldn't. Adrian was too close, and when the silence between them finally broke, what came next was inevitable. The silence between them lasted only seconds, yet it felt like eternity. The air in the hall was heavy, almost tangible, as if the house itself were holding its breath. Sophia tried to look away, but Adrian held her in his orbit, his eyes burning with something half fury, half restrained desire. "You're crossing the line," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Maybe," he replied, stepping closer. "But tell me, what is your line, Sophia?" Her name sounded different on his lips, weighted, electric, intimate. She stepped back, but her hip hit the edge of the table. He didn't touch her. He didn't need to. His nearness alone was enough to steal her breath. "You don't understand," she said softly. This is supposed to be professional. Is that really what you want it to be?" His voice was low, rough, almost a whisper. "Because it doesn't look that way." Sophia's pulse raced. He was right, and she hated that he was. From the moment they met, something had been growing between them, something silent and dangerous like a flame hidden beneath ashes. Adrian lifted his hand slowly and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I tried to stay away," he murmured. but you make me lose control." His touch was gentle, but his gaze said everything. He was fighting something he had already lost. Sophia closed her eyes for a heartbeat, searching for air. When she opened them, his face was only inches from hers. "Don't do this," she whispered. "Then tell me to stop," he said, his tone deep, steady. But no words came. Instead, Sophia met his gaze, and in that moment, the world fell silent. He kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was fierce, desperate, full of everything they had held back until now. For a moment, jealousy, fear, and desire became one, something neither of them could control. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Adrian's eyes were still burning. "This is my limit," he said quietly, "and you've just crossed it with me." The night had ended, but the silence that followed was louder than any word. Sophia woke wrapped in linen sheets, the pale morning light filtering through the curtains of the guest room. Beside her, the space was empty. Adrian was gone. For a moment, she thought she had dreamed it all, but his scent still lingered on the pillow, and her body still trembled from the memory. What they had shared wasn't just desire, it was something deeper, something that frightened her with its intensity. She put on her robe and walked quietly down the stairs. Adrian was in the hall, his back to her, staring at the same portrait of Elena. In the morning light, the painting seemed almost alive. The woman's eyes had the same quiet glow as Sophia's. "Do you always come here after?" She hesitated. "After you've been with someone." Adrian turned slowly. His face showed no surprise, only a deep, tired sadness. "I don't get involved with anyone, Sophia. Not since her." The words hung in the air like smoke. "Then what was last night?" she asked, her voice low but steady, fighting to hide the tremor beneath it. He took a step closer but didn't touch her. "It was a mistake," he murmured. "Or maybe it was what's left of a man trying to forget a ghost." The blow was silent but sharp. Sophia stepped back, eyes glistening. "So that's what I am to you?" she whispered. "A reflection?" Adrian looked away, unable to answer. And in that moment, Sophia realized that what bound her to him wasn't only desire. It was the mirror of an old wound, one that neither of them knew how to heal. Sophia left in the early afternoon, taking only her camera and a pain she couldn't name. The sky was overcast, as if the world itself had chosen to share her weight. She didn't look back. She couldn't bear to see Adrian standing at the doorway, still and silent, a shadow bound to his past. The following days passed slowly. Her apartment felt hollow, even surrounded by books, photos, and the hum of the city. But the emptiness wasn't in the room. It was inside her. On the third morning, a soft knock broke the silence. No words, no name. Just a cream-colored envelope with her name written by hand. Sophia's heartbeat quickened. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet, written in deep blue ink. "Sophia, some people appear in our lives only to remind us that we're still capable of feeling. You reminded me of that. But what I feel for you frightens me, because it's real. And I don't know how to love without losing control. If I stay, I'll destroy you. If I leave, I'll leave the best of me with you. A." Her hands trembled as she read. A single tear fell onto the signature. She hated him for leaving. But she hated even more that she understood why. Sophia placed the letter on the table and stared at the ink stains. It was strange. Even in his absence, he was still there. The road back to the mansion felt longer than Sophia remembered. The cold mountain wind pressed against the car window, and the sound of tires over the stone path echoed like memories she couldn't silence. She didn't know exactly why she was returning. Maybe to close what had been left open, or maybe because she needed to see him one last time. When the gates opened, everything looked the same. The garden, the silence, the tall windows. Only she had changed. Adrian was in the gallery, standing before the same painting of Elena. When he saw her, his eyes filled with something between surprise and fear. "I thought you'd never come back," he said, his voice rough, almost broken. "So did I," Sophia replied softly. "But some things don't end with distance." He took a slow step toward her. "I read your letter so many times the words began to fade." Sophia smiled faintly. "And still, I could hear you in them." Adrian moved closer, and for a moment the silence returned, heavy but no longer painful. Now it was filled with regret, with tenderness. "I loved you the wrong way," he confessed. I mistook you for what I'd lost." Sophia lifted her eyes to his. The man before her was no longer the one haunted by ghosts, only someone trying to begin again. "Then love me the right way," she said, "from now on." And for the first time, Adrian's gaze no longer sought the past. It finally found the present. Months later, the gallery was full. Soft lights reflected off white walls, and each visitor moved quietly, captivated by the new works of Sofia Andrade's exhibition. At the center, one single photograph drew every eye, a man and a woman standing together by a window. She smiled with her eyes, he smiled with his soul. The title beneath it was written in delicate letters, "Under His Gaze." Adrian arrived late in the evening, after the crowd had gone. He stood before the photograph for a long while, saying nothing. Sophia approached, and he took her hand gently, in silence. "At last," he murmured, "you've captured what was outside the frame." She leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "No, Adrian, you did." And for the first time their love was truly seen, not through a lens but through life itself.